Can you tell us a bit about Calypsus Brass and specifically how was the process about starting a group during like COVID and uh, and just overall being in a professional brass ensemble?
Yeah, so the group started not with me, but a couple of the other members, Jacqueline Langford and Lauren Rudzinskis, who works for IWBC as well. They knew each other, I believe from Eastman, and they talked about, let's get a quintet together and started reaching out to other people that they knew. So Jacqueline brought in the other trumpet player, Carrie Blosser, and then they were looking for a horn and a tuba. So I'm actually one of the last people to join the group. And that happened because Carrie had attended this Women in Brass thing that I was doing a guest presentation for back in 2020, I believe. So she kind of knew of me, and then she reached out and we all met. And most of the first year of that of the group was just on Zoom and kind of deciding what we wanted to do. So this is not, I wouldn't say this would be your typical group because it started during a time when we weren't really able to travel very much. So it started as this idea of, well, we've all had to become, a lot more professional at recording ourselves during this time. We all became video editors during this time for our studios and our various projects that we were doing. So let's put that to use. We all kind of had a common goal of prioritizing composers who are not from the kind of standard white male canon. And so it kind of snowballed from there. You know, I would say I think some people have said, to me, oh, it must be tough to start a group and not be in person. I would say, one great way to test out if your group is going to work long term is to have to do everything online and on Zoom, because that stuff can get really tedious, and the division of labor has to be figured out. People's strengths and weaknesses have to be figured out, and if you can do that basically online, then what we have found is that once we're in person, everything is much easier than what we've been doing. So we were able to get together in person. The first time we were able to perform in person was this past March at McNeese State University in Louisiana, which is where Jacqueline Langford teaches. So that all of that up until that time, we were just doing these virtual premieres, we did a virtual benefit concert for Lift Music Fund, and basically just putting together these recordings remotely. So the benefit of this group is that, like a lot of groups, our members are scattered around kind of around the Midwest / Louisiana. So we're not together all the time. But the other the other thing about it, I guess the flip side of that is that because we always intended to do things remotely, that doesn't really stop us from doing what we want to do. So we started out with that idea of getting this group together and being a performing ensemble, but also making recording a priority. And pretty early in the process, we got hooked up with Rising Tide Music Publications, which works with composers who are Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian American composers who are kind of at the beginning of their career. So we now have like a queue, a list of stuff that we're recording and putting out there, and kind of benchmarking when we're going to do these things, and then when we're going to be together in person and touring. So it's kind of coming together that way, but sort of around everyone's busy schedules. So it's been a very unique way of putting that together. But in terms of the experience, I would say, we're doing what works for us, which is very specific. It's probably not what would work for everyone, but it's what works for us and our personnel and our circumstances. And I think the key to it is basically that no one is trying to make anybody do anything they're not comfortable with. So basically no one is saying, well, we have to do this, and if we don't do that, then I don't want to be a part of it. Or no one is telling everyone that we have to be touring for 100 days out of the year or whatever. It's more like the mission has come together based on the personnel. So that's, I guess, the advantage of having and getting together 5 specific people who can agree on a mission.
And then something else I think is very unique about Calypsus, I was wanting to ask about. You guys work a lot one on one with like the composers. Like on your YouTube channel, you have interviews with a lot of the composers. So what do you find is the most important thing when working with composers and getting their like either sometimes their first recordings and making sure the what you guys produce is what they are hoping for. So can you just talk a bit about the relationship between a chamber group and a composer?
Yeah, that has been a really interesting part of this group and something that I didn't have a ton of opportunities to do beforehand, at least in a chamber setting. So it's really a two-way street. We've done some workshops for Rising Tide where we work with composers and they bring us their piece and they say, is this possible? And like, sometimes, especially for like the trumpets, for example, it's like, no, this is not possible, or this is possible, but if we do it, if you leave it this way, people might not want to play this piece as much as if maybe we're to like, throw in a couple measures of more of rest here or whatever needs to happen. So we've worked with composers in that way. And then we've also worked with composers, trying to get recordings together that they appreciate. And this is maybe the part of it that is hardest, is that you're recording things remotely. And that's what we try to do is we try to stay really true to the score and to what the composer has written that they want. If the composer wrote a tempo, we record it at that tempo. We have a click track in our ears. We're recording our parts. We are talking to each other. And we have like feedback, and sometimes we'll send ideas to each other. Here's how I'm playing this, or here's how long this should, be, or something like that. But by and large, we're trying to stick pretty true to the text because most of the time we are just providing that first recording. This is what you put on paper and this is what we're putting down, on a recording track. Sometimes that's slightly different than what we play in person. For example, we just played a piece by Alice Gomez at IWBC. We recorded the piece at the tempo that was written. I believe we played it a bit faster in the show just to that was what felt right to us in performance. But we do view those two things as different as, this is the recording, this is what we're putting out there for posterity. And then in live performance, we give ourselves a little bit more leeway, a little bit more freedom. But it's been a really rewarding part of the process to actually talk to composers. And there's a filtering down kind of effect as well, where I'm coaching a brass quintet here and I'm giving them some music from, Rising Tide composers. I gave them some music by Lauren Bernofsky to play. They're happy to play it. She's happy to have it played. It works out well in that way as well. And kind of like getting those pieces just out there in the consciousness a little bit more.